Everyone returned this problem cat until she chose her own family. Everyone had a reason. The first family said she was too distant. The second said she was aggressive. The third filled out the return form without making eye contact, handed her carrier across the counter, and walked out before the shelter worker could say a single word. 3 families, 3 chances, 0 second thoughts, and every time she came back to the same kennel. The same gray metal door, the same thin fleece blanket that smelled like every person who had given up on her. Her name was Nova. She was a brown tab with dark stripes running from the top of her head all the way down her sides, green eyes that caught light like shallow water, and a face that shelter volunteers had learned to describe carefully in her adoption profile. Not unfriendly, they wrote, just selective. What they meant was that Nova looked at most people the way a judge looks at a defendant she has already decided is guilty. Flat, measuring, unimpressed. She weighed 9 pounds. She had been returned 3 times in 14 months. She had bitten exactly 1 person, a volunteer who reached into her carrier without warning, which, if you think about it, was not entirely unreasonable. Between returns, she lived in Kennel 7. She did not pace, she did not cry. She sat in the back and watched the foot traffic move past her door with the patient stillness of someone who had learned that most things coming toward you eventually turn around and leave. The shelter staff liked her. They just did not know what to do with her. The shelter director had started quietly dreading the day someone would ask about her prognosis. Marcus found her on a Tuesday. He was 38 years old, a software engineer who worked from home in a 2-bedroom apartment that had felt exactly the same size for 4 years and somehow felt smaller every month. He had not planned to adopt a cat that day. He had gone to the shelter because his neighbor asked him to drop off a donation bag, and he said yes because he had nowhere else to be, and saying yes to small things had become easier than sitting with the quiet. He almost walked past her kennel. Nova was sitting in the back corner, not the front where other cats pressed against the glass and performed their best adoptable behavior. She was in the corner, upright, watching him with the specific expression of someone who had been through this enough times to stop pretending. Marcus stopped. He stood in front of her kennel for about 2 minutes without doing anything. He did not make kissing sounds, he did not stick his finger through the wire. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at her the way you look at someone you recognize but cannot quite place. Nova looked back. After about 2 minutes, she walked to the front of the kennel, sat down, and stared at him from approximately 6 inches away. The shelter workers said quietly that Nova had been returned 3 times, that she was a project, that there were other cats, friendlier cats, easier cats, cats who would sit in his lap on the first night. Marcus said he would take Nova. He signed the paperwork, he paid the adoption fee, he drove home with a carrier in his back seat that was completely silent the entire 40-minute ride, which he later said was either deeply ominous or deeply dignified. And he still wasn't sure which. The first week was an education. Nova disappeared behind the washing machine within 10 minutes of arriving and did not come out for meals. Marcus left food by the opening and did not comment on it, did not reach in, did not negotiate. He sat on the laundry room floor for 20 minutes each evening, back against the wall, not talking, not trying, just present, just close enough. She ate every night. He could hear her. On the 5th day, he was working at his desk when he felt something brush against his ankle. He looked down. Nova was sitting beside his chair, not touching him, not asking for anything, just there. Her tail was wrapped neatly around her feet. Her eyes were half closed. She looked like someone who had stopped by on the way to somewhere else and had not quite decided to leave yet. He did not react. He went back to his screen. She stayed for 11 minutes, then left. This was, he would later understand, an enormous thing. By the end of the 2nd week, she had moved from behind the washing machine to the top of the bookshelf in his office. Still elevated, still watching, but in the same room. Marcus had started narrating his day quietly while he worked. Not to her exactly, just out loud. What he was doing, what he was thinking about, what he was going to make for dinner.
She never responded, she just listened. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed yet, I have to be honest, that stings a little. Hit subscribe. You'll want to be here for what comes next. And then, on a Saturday morning 3 weeks in, Nova jumped up onto the couch beside him. Not on him, beside him, 6 inches away, facing the window. He did not move. He barely breathed. After a while, very slowly, she leaned until her side was pressed against his leg. That was it. That was the whole gesture. No purring, no looking up at him, no performance. Just the quiet, deliberate weight of her against him. And the first time in 4 years of sitting in that apartment that Marcus felt the silence become something he could actually feel the shape of. Warm, present, real. Within a month, Nova had established routines Marcus had not created and could not have predicted. She waited outside the bathroom every morning and walked him to his desk. She sat on the left armrest of the couch during the exact hour he spent doing nothing productive. When he had a long call, Nova appeared on the desk, sat just outside the camera frame, and stayed until it ended. She was not affectionate in the way people usually mean. She did not climb into his lap, she did not perform. What she did was simpler and, in its own way, more devastating. She showed up, every time, in every room, without announcement. She made herself present in the specific way of someone who has decided, after considerable deliberation, that you are worth the risk. A shelter volunteer ran into Marcus at a coffee shop 6 months later. She almost did not recognize him. Not because he looked different, but because he looked like a person who had somewhere to be when he got home. She asked about Nova. He pulled out his phone. There were 47 photos. Nova on the bookshelf, Nova beside his coffee cup, Nova asleep on his keyboard with the expression of someone who had made a deliberate career choice. And one photo the volunteer said she almost had to look away from. Nova in a sunbeam on the kitchen floor, eyes closed, face tilted up, with Marcus's hand resting gently under her chin. She had been called a problem cat. She was not a problem cat. She was a cat who had learned through 3 returned carriers and 14 months of gray metal doors that people leave, and she had decided, reasonably, to wait until she found one who would not. Some cats choose you immediately. They climb into your lap at the shelter and make it impossible to say no. Nova chose differently. She watched. She measured. She waited until she was certain. And when she was certain, she leaned against his leg on a Saturday morning and let the silence between them become something else entirely. Do you think animals choose us, or do we choose them? Tell me in the comments.